Hi everyone, this is Dr. McClellan. I'm giving you your first lecture for this semester. Hopefully you can hear me okay. If you have any issues with any of these PowerPoints, please do make sure to email me or send me a message to let me know if there's any issue with the audio quality or anything else. So for this lecture, I'm just going to cover some basics of the ancient Greek language to make sure that we're all on the same page. So my agenda for this lecture is to go over some basic grammar, what sorts of words we're going to be looking at and how to translate them, how to address them, which will include verbs, nouns, adjectives, and so forth. Those are going to be the basics that we'll cover for Chapter 1. And after that, we'll take a look at syntax. Syntax is a word that simply means an arrangement, putting together. That's what it literally means, syntax, arrangement together of sentences. How are sentences constructed in Greek? What are the word orders that we can typically expect in a sentence? And we'll take a look at that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the definite article, words like the in English that go with words. We'll take a closer look at that. So to start with, we should understand what parts of speech we'll find in ancient Greek, ones that you're going to need to pay attention to in the vocab list that you need to memorize for Monday. So we'll start with verbs. Some of you probably already know these basic definitions, but just in case, to make sure we're all on the same page, when we talk about verbs, we talk about words that describe an action like run, throw, hit, or so forth, or a state of being. The verb am, to be, or seems, to seem like a certain way. Those are also verbs, of course. Greek also has verbs. They are separate from nouns and other things like that, so we'll take a look at those. Adverbs are words that modify or add meaning to verbs. It's in the name itself, adverbs. They add to verbs. So, for instance, in English, we often see words like quickly or words that end in ly as adverbs. So, he runs quickly. How quickly or how much does he run? What way does someone run? He runs quickly. She runs quickly or slowly, for example. That should be fairly straightforward. We will also have nouns, persons, places, or things in Greek. Those should be pretty straightforward. Adjectives in Greek, as in English, modify or add meaning to nouns. So, what type of ox? What did the ox look like? Oh, I might be referring to the strong ox, the blue ox, the red ox, the tall or short ox. Or I could be talking about someone and say, Penelope, oh, she's kind, she's beautiful, she's smart, she's loyal, and so forth. Those are all adjectives, so just be aware of the basic definitions. This will become important a bit later when we talk more about adjectives in particular. So when we look at Greek verbs in particular, there are always 5 pieces of information that I need to know. And if I know all 5 pieces of information, I can translate any Greek verb that I see in front of me. So those 5 pieces that you can see on the screen in front of you are person, number, tense, mood, and voice. I'm going to repeat that again because this is a list you want to have memorized. Have it repeating over and over in the back of your head. Person, number, tense, mood, voice. Repeat it to yourself. Person, number, tense, mood, voice. Person, number, tense, mood, voice. If you can identify those 5 pieces of information, you can translate any Greek verb that is in front of you, no matter how obscure, how different it may seem. If you know those 5 pieces of information, you're all set. So, what do they mean? Well, person and number are basically how we break down I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, and they. If you've taken any modern language, whether it's Spanish, French, English, or anything else, you've probably already dealt with these. First person refers to the person speaking. I'm speaking right now. If I refer to myself as the subject of a sentence, I'll use the word I. I'm talking right now. I'm the professor. I happen to be sitting in my office in the middle of Friday afternoon. I find that it's very hot outside, and so forth. I'm the subject. That's first person. But if I'm talking about more than one person, but I still want to include myself in that group, I'll use the first person in the plural and say we. So for instance, I could say we in the classics department are all sitting in our offices on a Friday afternoon. We might not all be recording lectures. I'm recording a lecture. I'm by myself, singular, and recording a lecture, but we collectively in the classics and philosophy department are not. We are all sitting in our offices doing some other work before we go home for the weekends. In a conversation, if you think about having a conversation with someone and you're chatting with someone, you are the first person and the person you're talking to will be second. So from my point of view, you guys listening to me are the second person in my conversation. So if I were just talking to one of you, I would use the singular form of you. You are listening, hopefully, pretty well to this lecture, and you, perhaps, hopefully, are taking some good notes from this lecture. If I were referring to all of you, happily, we are in San Antonio, Texas. We have a wonderful little phrase, y'all, or you all, if you want to be a little bit more of a New Englander like myself. But you'll often hear me say y'all because I love that phrase, and I love that it's a nice, distinct way of splitting apart from you. If I refer to all of you, you are a second person plural if I'm addressing all of you together. So I might say y'all instead of you. So that should be pretty straightforward. First person and second person both have singulars and plurals. Same with the third person. If I'm talking to one of you about somebody else, maybe they're sitting in a hallway, maybe they're somewhere else, maybe they're on TV. If it's one person, I'll use one of three pronouns to refer to that third person or thing. Either he, she, or it. And this is key because, like in Spanish, Greek has different genders for nouns. So if I'm referring to something that is masculine or a male person, I'll use he. If it's female, she. Or if it's a thing, something neuter, I'll say it in ancient Greek. He, she, or it for third person singular if I'm talking about one person or thing that's apart from us. If I'm referring to multiples, I'll say they, right? If I'm talking about a group of people outside, I might say they are being too loud, they are interrupting the lecture, they need to go somewhere else. So that should all be pretty intuitive. You use this all the time in your English speech, person and number. So those two are pretty straightforward. You will often see verb charts like the one you see on this slide. This box that you see here with first, second, and third, singular and plural. You're going to become very familiar with charts like those because you're going to be filling out Greek verb charts that look just like that. We'll see a bit of that in a minute. So that covers person and number. The third piece of information I want to have about a Greek verb when I see one is the tense of the verb. Tense refers to when an action occurs in time. So for the purposes of Athenaze right now, all of the verbs that you're going to see occur in the present tense. They're happening right now. So-and-so says something right now. So-and-so is saying something right now. I am currently, in the present tense, speaking to you through my computer. Later on, we'll learn different tenses like the future tense, which is what I will use to say I will hopefully record another lecture for you guys like this, or I will cover the future tense. I will cover other things. And there are other tenses that cover the past and so on. This gets a little bit technical, but we will deal with that a bit later in the course. The fourth piece of information I will need, which is not terribly important right now, is mood. Mood describes the degree to which something, an action, is real. So a couple examples that you see on the screen in front of you, there's a very big difference between saying, I will study for the quiz on Friday or Monday versus, I should study for the quiz on Friday, but I might not. Or I might not study for the quiz on Friday. I'm not totally sure. There's a difference in how real those actions are according to the speaker, and that's the key thing here. Mood only describes the degree to which an action is real according to the person saying it. So I could say, for example, I will ace the quiz on Friday. I can be very sure of that. That might not be factually accurate. I could totally flunk the quiz, but if I believe it to be 100% true, I'm going to use a different mood in my speech than if I were going to hesitate and say, I think I'm going to ace the quiz on Friday. I really should ace the quiz on Friday, but maybe not, or I might not ace it at all. There are different moods in Greek as well, and we'll cover those when we get to them. Finally, this is important for this particular chapter. The fifth piece of information I need about a Greek verb is the voice of the verb. Voice, a simple definition for this, is the relationship between the subject and the verb. Very basically, Greek verbs can either be active, where the subject performs the action of the verb. Like if I hit the ball, I'm acting. I'm not being hit. Nothing's happening to me. I'm the one performing the action of hitting. I hit the ball. On the other hand, I could be passive. I can use the passive voice to say, I'm not hitting the ball. I'm hit by the ball. Maybe someone else threw it, but I'm not performing the action in that sentence, right? If you look at that sentence, I am hit implies that the ball is doing the hitting and I'm doing nothing, and probably somebody very mean, threw the ball to hit me. I am hit by the ball. That's passive. Where it gets a little bit tricky, and we're not going to see this for a few more chapters, is where we get to the middle voice. Greek is very special and different from other languages like Latin, for example, which only has the active and passive voice. Greek has a third voice, the middle voice, which is a little bit tricky to get your head around, but basically the middle voice splits the difference between active and passive, and usually covers actions that have a reflexive quality. Maybe the subject of a sentence does something to him or herself. For example, if I decide to hit myself with a ball, for whatever silly reason I might do that, I might use the middle voice in ancient Greek. I hit myself with the ball might be a way I'd use the middle voice in an expression. This will all be a lot clearer when we get more tenses, moods, and voices under our belt. But for now, all that's important for you to know are the 5 pieces of information that you need for a Greek verb. So just remember this list: person, number, tense, mood, voice. However you have to write it down, make sure to know those 5 categories. Now, when we're looking at a verb, the way I can get my basic information is to understand how Greek verbs are constructed. Any basic Greek verb always starts with a stem, the actual meaning, what the action is I'm trying to get across, and to that stem, I add an ending which tells me the person and the number, who's doing the action. So for example, one of the verbs you're going to learn this chapter is lego, to speak, to say. It's where we get our root for a word like lexicon, which comes from the leg root of this word. So you can see, for example, on your screen, the stem of this verb on the left is leg. And an ancient Greek listener hearing that sound would know, okay, someone is speaking, but until they get the ending of that word, they don't know who's doing it. So that's when I add epsilon iota, which happens to be the third person singular ending for that verb. So when I put the two of those together, leg and ei, I get lege, which means he, she, or it, some third person says. So lege, that word on the right side of the box, means he, she, or it says. It could be a man, woman, a thing. We don't know until we have more information, but at least by looking at the ending of the verb, we know that he, she, or it is speaking, one person. So it's very important to know with Greek verbs to look at the end of the word to know who's speaking. That's going to be very important information for us to know in order to translate a Greek sentence when we start to see fuller ones on Monday. Fortunately for right now, in Chapter 1, you're only going to see third-person singulars, he, she, or it. It's not going to be until a little bit later when we see I, or you, or we, or y'all, or so forth. So for now, it's not too much to worry about, but just know that Greek verbs have a stem and an ending that help you put the meaning together. So let's go over at least some of the verbs from this chapter that are going to be very important. The most important Greek verb out there, which unfortunately is pretty irregular, so we will cover the forms a bit later, is esti. You can see at the top. Esti is a little interesting. It's very irregular, so for now, you just kind of have to know that the stem of this verb is s, to be, with t. That happens to be a different form of the third person singular. You don't really need to know that. Just know that the form in black there in bold, esti, means he, she, or it is, depending on who the subject is in the sentence. Esti can also have a nu at the end of it. You can sometimes see estin instead of esti if the verb is followed by a consonant or a vowel. That makes the difference. If it's followed by a word that starts with a vowel, so like estin oikos, there is a house, you'll see a nu come between that iota and the omicron. On the other hand, if it's followed by a consonant like let's say, esti kuon, there is a dog, or the dog exists, then you're going to see no nu in between there. This will be clearer when we see some examples on Monday. So esti, he, she, or it is, very important word for you to know. We just saw lege, he, she, or it says, speaks, or tells. Starts with the root leg and adds that a at the ending, he, she, or it. Oike means he, she, or it lives or dwells. This is actually the root for the word oikos, which is a house, and it's actually the root of our word economics in English. Economics, in its ancient definition, was the study of stuff you do in your household, i.e. manage all your wealth, your property, your sheep, all the things that you take in from the harvest and so forth. So oike means to he, she, or it lives or dwells, presumably in a house, hopefully in a house. The next word we'll need is pone. Pone, he, she, or it works or toils. Pone. So you can see the root pone means work, toil, and the a ending means he, she, or it. He, she, or it works or toils. Pone. Next word is phile. He, she, or it loves. So a word like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, is quite literally what the name means. Phile and adelphos means brother. We'll learn that word later. Phile, he, she, or it loves. Next, kaire. Remember to keep that kai soft, so like a ch. Kaire, he, she, or it rejoices. Next one, aire. Aire, he, she, or it lifts. You can almost think of the word air in English spelled a very similar way. So if you put something up in the air, pull it up into the air, you're lifting it. Aire, he, she, or it lifts. Next, badidze. Badidze. Remember that zeta there only has one loop, so it's like a Z. Badidze. He, she, or it walks or goes or moves somewhere. Typically covers walking. Next, very important word, kathidze. There's another zeta, and don't forget that theta there, that lowercase th sound. Kathidze. He, she, or it sits. Kathidze. And then finally, fere. Fere. He, she, or it carries. It almost sounds like the word ferry, like a boat that brings something across a river, for example. Fere. He, she, or it carries. So those are the verbs that you're going to need to know from this chapter. Okay, let's talk about nouns. The important thing to know about Greek, like Latin, those of you who have taken Latin before will know all about this system. For those of you who haven't taken a dead language, the important thing to know about Greek is that it's an inflected language. What that means is that in cases like verbs, the word meaning changes depending on how the ending changes in that verb or noun, depending on which type of word you're looking at. Greek nouns have 3 pieces of information to them. So just like with verbs, where you have person, number, tense, mood, and voice, those 5 pieces of information, Greek nouns have 3 pieces of information that we need to know: case, number, and gender. So let's take some of the simple ones at the bottom first. Gender, there are 3 genders for nouns in Greek. If you've spoken German, for example, if you've learned any German, it's also going to have 3 genders. Spanish has 2, the masculine and the feminine, as does French. Greek has 3, masculine, which typically covers masculine nouns, so male people are called men, the masculine gender in ancient Greek. Feminine, for feminine nouns. And neuter often covers things. Rocks happen to be neuter. Trees happen to be neuter in Greek as well. Number is pretty straightforward. If you're talking about one person, place, or thing, or more than one, you have either singular or plural. That's pretty straightforward. The more important thing that you'll need to know for this chapter is the system of cases. The way Greek nouns work, which I'll explain in the syntax part of this PowerPoint, really depends on the case that you use in the noun. And depending on the spelling of a particular noun, the ending that you put onto it, you get a different case, which tells you how the word is working in the sentence in front of you. The two that you really need to know are in red, but I'm going to go through each of them because this list is going to be important for you to remember. There are 5 cases in ancient Greek. The nominative, when a word appears in the nominative case, it means it's the subject of the sentence. Anytime I see a word that's nominative, it's performing the action. It's going with the verb in the sentence, wherever it may fall. Nominative indicates the subject. Next, genitive, which we won't see for a bit, indicates origin or possession. So if I want to say my book, for example, I would use the genitive of me in an ancient Greek sentence. The dative case in Greek is usually used to indicate the indirect object in a sentence. So what does that mean? Well, let's take an English sentence, for example, and I'm going to use the audio for this. If I say, I give the book to my friend is the indirect object. It's indirect because the direct object in a sentence is what's receiving the action. So let me read that sentence to you again. I give the book to my friend. So if you think about that sentence for a minute, the book is the thing that's receiving the action. It's being given. I am the subject. I'm performing the action. I'm giving the book. And I could just say I give the book and finish the sentence, but I want to be more specific. I give it to my friend. Well, my friend is the indirect object. I'm not actually doing anything physical or by action to my friend. Instead, he or she is a byproduct of the action. They're indirectly receiving the benefit of the action. They're receiving the book, but they're not the direct object of the verb give. I'm not giving my friend to anybody. I'm giving a book to him or to her. So that's what we mean by an indirect object. On the other hand, the accusative, which is going to be important, you will see this chapter, indicates the direct object, the word that receives the action of a verb. This will be a bit clearer. I'll have an example in Greek a bit later. Finally, a case that we will see occasionally when a character is speaking in one of our texts is the vocative, which is a case that I would use to address a person, place, or thing. So if I call one of you by name on Monday and say, hey, so-and-so, I need you to give me the answer to this question, I would use the vocative case to address you. Think of vocal. If I vocalize your name and call you, whether your name is Jane or Tom or Jesus or something else, I would be using the vocative case if I called you out directly. Hey, so-and-so. The vocative is pretty straightforward. We'll go over that a bit later. So, when we talk about Greek nouns, we typically look at the inflection, and along with that, Greek nouns get the definite article, which we'll see a little bit below. So at the very top, like verbs, nouns also have stems and endings. But the difference here is that because you're dealing with nouns, the endings will tell you the case and the number. So they will tell you how they're working in the sentence. Are they the subject, the direct object? Is it possessive, or however it's supposed to work? And what's the number? Is it one or more of those things? So we'll take one example from this chapter. The word anthropos. Anthropos, our root for anthropology, the study of people, human societies, comes from the Greek word anthropos, man or human person. The nominative ending of that word, you can see, starts with the root anthropa, man, but if I just had the stem anthropa, I don't know how it's working in the sentence. Is the man doing something? Is something happening to the man? Is the man being thrown across a river? Is something striking him down? I don't know until I have the ending. So if I add the nominative ending, sigma, and I end up with anthropos, the form you see up top, then I know that anthropos is the subject. The man is doing something. They're the subject. On the other hand, if I change the ending to have a nu, that n sound at the end, and change it to anthropon, then I know that anthropos, the man, is the direct object. Maybe the man's being hit by a bat, whatever might happen. So that's how I tell the difference in case. So endings are going to be important to nouns as well. That's really the bottom line with a lot of Greek words. You have to look at the ending to see how they're functioning in the sentence. Oftentimes, you have the benefit of definite articles. Definite article is basically a fancy term for words like the in English. We have versions of this in ancient Greek. For those of you who've taken Latin before, this is going to be quite different. You don't find the definite article very often in Latin, but they're very common in Greek like they are in English. So for the purposes of this chapter, you'll see a couple in the passages that you're going to be reading. The nominative definite article, you can see in the top one in red, is ha. Notice it's an omicron with a rough breathing over it. That means there's going to be an H sound at the beginning. Ha anthropos, the man or the human, the person, is doing something. They're nominative. On the other hand, if I want to make the direct object, if I hit the man, I'm going to change it to the accusative case and change it to ton anthropon. Both of those expressions by themselves mean the man, the human, but the different cases tell me how they're working in the sentence. The top one, ha anthropos, means the man or the human is doing something. The bottom one, ton anthropon, means something's happening to the man or the human, but they're not acting in the sentence. It'll be a little clearer with a couple examples. Proper nouns, this is also something where Greek looks a little different. Proper nouns, people, places, or things with proper names, cities, people, and so forth, also get definite articles, which looks a little bit weird. So in the very first sentence of your reading this chapter, you're going to be introduced to our main character, ha Dikaiopoulos. Dikaiopoulos, you can see his name on the left. The way we translate that, we would not say the Dikaiopoulos, that's just his name, as silly as it would sound to say the Sarah or the John or the Jesus in class. Instead, I just say their name in English, Dikaiopoulos, even if there's a definite article next to his name. The same goes in the accusative. If I have ton Dikaiopoulos, that's his accusative name, ton Dikaiopoulos, I still say just Dikaiopoulos. His name happens to mean just city, but we'll come back to him a bit later. So where this becomes important is when I want to have adjectives fit with nouns in a sentence. And this introduces us to a very important rule that we're going to see in our Greek sentences. If you remember the basic definition of an adjective, you probably remember that adjectives are words that modify or add meaning to nouns. Remember the tall ox or the strong ox, the small ox, for example. The same principle goes in Greek, but this is really important. Because Greek nouns can change their cases, adjectives have to do that as well, so that I know to match the right adjective to the right noun in a Greek sentence. So, the rule to remember here, and you should write this down and memorize it over and over and over, Greek adjectives have to match the nouns that they're modifying in case, number, and gender. A couple examples you can see below. Ha Dikaiopoulos sophos. The adjective sophos, as you can guess, means wise. If you know someone who's named Sophia, she's named that because she might be wise. Hopefully she's pretty wise, otherwise that would be a silly name. But ha Dikaiopoulos sophos means wise Dikaiopoulos. The other one next to it, ha kalos anthropos. I'll read that one again. Ha kalos anthropos means the beautiful or fine man. I know those all go together, either ha Dikaiopoulos sophos or ha kalos anthropos, because all three of those words agree in case, number, and gender. They're all masculine, they're all nominative, and they're all singular. They're all talking about one person. And you can even hear the similarity. They all rhyme with each other in a way. Dikaiopoulos sophos, kalos anthropos. They all sound the same. That's the way that Greeks would signal words that are meant to go together in a sentence. Same thing if I change the case of those to the accusative. All I have to do is make sure they're all masculine accusative singular. So, taking those same expressions, I could change wise Dikaiopoulos to ton Dikaiopoulos sophon. Those are all masculine, accusative, and singular. Same with ton kalon anthropon, masculine, accusative, singular. So these are going to be important. Case, number, and gender all have to match for an adjective to modify a noun. Okay? So this gets us to the last bit of vocabulary for this chapter, and this is important. You want to keep up with these on your flashcards. So the nouns that you need to know for this chapter, I'm going to go through them one by one. As you write these down on your flashcards, it's important to remember to write both the article and the noun. The article is going to tell you what the gender of the noun is. It just so happens that all of the nouns you're getting in this chapter are masculine. We know that because they use the definite article ha that you can see there, just the omicron with rough breathing. That tells me all of these nouns are masculine in gender. So, for example, the first one, ho agros, agros means field, which is a root for agriculture. You can hear the root in that, ho agros, agriculture. Ho agros means field, a masculine noun. Next one, we just saw this before, ho anthropos, anthropos, a man, human, or person. Ha auturgos, that one's tricky. There's a couple diphthongs in there. At the very beginning, you'd see au with a smooth breathing, means I'm not going to add an H sound to it, but rather keep it smooth. So ha out, and remember omicron and upsilon is just like soup in English. So auturgos, auturgos is a farmer, auturgos. Next one, ha oikos, oikos. We saw the verb for this, oike, to live. If you live somewhere, you live in a house. Oikos, house, root for economics. Hoponos, easier to pronounce. Ponos is work, toil. If you work really hard at something, you're performing a ponos, a work or toil. Next one, very important word in ancient Greek, hositos. Cetos, that's a long iota. Cetos means grain or bread, used for both. If you harvested grain or made bread, it was all referred to by one word, cetos, grain, bread. Next, helios. Helios. You probably heard of heliocentrism, the idea that the sun is at the center of our solar system. The heliocentric model means that the sun, the helios, is at the center. So that's our root for heliocentric. Helios, sun. Next word, finally, all important, chronos. Chronos, very important word that means time, our root for chronology. Chronos, time. Some adjectives that you'll see in this chapter as well. Kalos. Kalos means fine or beautiful. It's our root for words like calligraphy, beautiful writing. Next, macros. Macros for macroeconomics. Large-scale economics. If you study international trade, you're studying macroeconomics. You're taking a bird's eye view of the picture. Macros. Macros. The opposite of macros is mikros. Mikros means small or short, our root for microeconomics. If you're not studying international trade, but rather a single household, you're studying microeconomics and trends within that. Next is polus. Polus means much or many. It's our root for polygamy, for someone who has multiple marriages, or a polyglot. If you know someone who's a polyglot, they speak multiple languages. A polyglot has its root in polus in ancient Greek. Polus, many or much. Next, iskouros, one of my favorite adjectives in ancient Greek. Iskouros. Iskouros. Remember, that's a chi, ch sound. Iskouros. Strong. Iskouros. Next, kalepos. Kalepos means difficult. Kalepos. And finally, at the very bottom, all important for this particular book, Athenaze. Don't forget that diphthong, aios at the end. Athenaze means Athenian. You can hear it in the word Athenaze. All right, so that covers all the vocabulary that you'll want to cover, apart from some miscellaneous stuff we'll cover later. So you'll want to have these nouns and adjectives in your flashcards. So let's talk about syntax. How do we put all of these together in a sentence? Well, Greek, as I mentioned before, is an inflected language, which means that syntax, the way you order sentences, doesn't depend on word order, but rather depends on word endings. You look at the end of a word to figure out who's performing an action and what noun is functioning as the subject or direct object. And that can be a little bit strange for those of us who are used to modern Romance languages like English, Spanish, and so forth, where word order is more important. Some English examples below. We usually put the subjects of our verbs at the beginning of a sentence. If I use the words Dikaiopoulos, carries, and the food, it changes the meaning depending on where I put those words. If I say Dikaiopoulos carries the food, that makes a lot of sense. He might be carrying a basket of bananas or something home. Dikaiopoulos carries the food. Subject, verb, direct object. That's the way we order things in English. If I randomly change the words around to say the food carries Dikaiopoulos, and I don't change the spelling at all, that completely changes the meaning, and perhaps a basket of bananas grew a couple legs and started carrying Dikaiopoulos, and we're completely in fantasy land. That makes no sense at all, right? Word order is very important in English. And if I really messed it up and said Dikaiopoulos the food carries, I might sound like Yoda, which is why when Yoda says something like, when 900 years old you reach, look as good you will not, what he's really doing, in fact, is using Greek syntax. So really, all of you are going to turn into little Yodas by the end of this semester, because Greek can change word order any time it wants to, because it's all about cases. Cases tell you how a word behaves in the sentence. So I'm going to start with a very basic sentence using some of the words from this chapter. Dikaiopoulos carries the food. We'll start with that one, the example we were using before. The way I would form that in a Greek sentence is to start with a subject. Who's the subject of this sentence? Who's performing the action? It's Dikaiopoulos. He's the one carrying. He's the one performing the action. That means he needs to be in the nominative case. Remember, the nominative is what I use for the subject. So you can see in red, I need to use the direct object, or the definite article, ha, before his name, Dikaiopoulos. Once I put him in the nominative, and he is here, he's the subject. No matter where he goes in the sentence, the beginning, the end, the middle, because he's in the nominative case, I know he's performing the action, and it doesn't matter where he goes. The verb carries, I need to use the right verb, phero, to carry. Fortunately, we already know what he carries looks like from the vocabulary, so I'm going to use fere, he, she, or it carries. Who's carrying? Well, I have a subject, Dikaiopoulos, who agrees with that, so I already have my two pieces together. Ha Dikaiopoulos fere, he carries. And I know my subject is him. So I need to know what he's carrying. Well, my sentence, if we go back to the top, I want to say he carries the food, or the grain, or the bread. My word for that in Greek, as we saw before, is sitos. But here's the thing. My bread needs to be in the accusative case. Now, if you go back a couple slides, or if you want to pause the video and go back to the nouns, remember that I have 5 cases in Greek, and the one that I use for the direct object is the accusative. So I'm going to change sitos to ton, seton. Ton, seton, that you see in blue, is accusative, and that tells me the bread, the grain, the food is the thing being carried. It's not the subject, so the bread can't be doing anything here. Dikaiopoulos is the one carrying because he's nominative, he's the subject. So I could just have a sentence that says, ha Dikaiopoulos fere ton seton. Dikaiopoulos carries the food. I can rearrange those, however, anywhere I want to. I could say, fere ha Dikaiopoulos ton seton. And it means the exact same thing. It still means Dikaiopoulos carries the food because all the cases are still the same. I could really move things out of whack and say, ton seton fere ha Dikaiopoulos. And it still means the same thing. Dikaiopoulos is still my subject, who's carrying the food. So Greek word order is pretty loose sometimes, and so it's very important for you guys to learn to look at the case, look at the endings of words, whether it's a noun or a verb or an adjective, to figure out where your subject is, where your verb is, and what the direct object is. So it's very important to pay attention to those pieces of information. One special exception to some of this pattern is when we use the verb to be. Esti, we saw he, she, or it is was very important earlier this chapter. When I use the verb to be in Greek, I usually use it to connect a subject with what we call a predicate, an adjective or a noun describing a subject. I could say the professor is tall, or the professor is this guy, or so-and-so is the president, etc., etc. The predicate is that describing adjective or noun that agrees with the subject. Well, if I want to say two things equal each other in a Greek sentence, I'm just going to follow the same system and make sure that they agree in case, number, and most of the time, gender. I could, for example, have a Greek sentence that says Achilles is a woman, and I might use a different gender. I'm not sure why I might necessarily say that, but if I wanted to, I might use a different gender. There are occasionally times where we'll see gender not necessarily agree, but case and number have to. Two nominatives have to go together. This will be a little bit more intuitive when we read some of the examples on Monday, but let's use a simple one below. You can see my verb in the black lettering there, esti or estin in the second example. Esti, he, she, or it is. Who's my subject? Let's use Dikaiopoulos and say Dikaiopoulos is strong. I want to describe him as a strong farmer. I could use the adjective iskouros to describe him. All I have to do to make them match is make sure they're in the same case. Since Dikaiopoulos is the subject of the verb, he's the one existing, he is, I'm going to use the nominative case for both. So, one example, ha Dikaiopoulos iskouros esti. Dikaiopoulos is strong, that means. And I can change the word order. Iskouros estin ho Dikaiopoulos. Strong is Dikaiopoulos. It sounds a little bit romantic, but it means the same thing. Dikaiopoulos is strong. That's how adjectives work. They always agree with the noun they're modifying. So, a couple more things that you're going to want to know for your vocabulary this chapter. If I want to say something is not the case, if I want to negate a verb, I'm going to use the adverb oo, which can sometimes have the ending ook with the kappa, or if it comes before a verb or noun or something else with rough breathing, a ha sound, I'll use ook. They all mean the same thing. They all mean not. They negate something. So if I say ook esti, it means something so-and-so is not blank. Un means and so or then. It kind of connects two ideas. It's almost like therefore. It's a very important word. We'll see that a little bit later, but you can remember it as and so. We call this word a postpositive because it's never the first word in a sentence. It's usually the second as it happens. You don't really necessarily need to know that for now, but just know that it means and so, or then. You also have a couple conjunctions that you will need to memorize from this chapter. One important one is Allah. Allah means but. So I could say, ha Dikaiopoulos iskouros esti. Dikaiopoulos is strong, Allah, but he might not be at home, or he might not be very tall. I might add something different at the end of that sentence. For that, I'd use Allah, but blank. Gar, the one below, gar means either for or because. We usually translate it as for. Dikaiopoulos is strong. Why? Well, he works in the field a lot, because he works in the field a lot. So I might use gar at the beginning of that clause. Kai, you'll see all the time, means and. So I might say, Dikaiopoulos esti iskouros kai poneros. Dikaiopoulos is strong and a little bit bothersome. I could connect two ideas together. Or Dikaiopoulos iskouros esti kai badidze. He is strong and he is walking. I can connect two verbs with kai as well. Kai just simply means and. You also have a couple prepositions here. This introduces us to a very important feature with prepositions like to or towards. The word you want to memorize is pros, but you also want to memorize this other piece of information with pros. When pros is followed by an accusative noun, it means to or towards. This is important because pros as a word can take other cases after it, like the dative, where it means something a little bit different. But for now, if you see pros followed by an accusative, it means to or towards that thing. So one example you can see below, badidze pros ton agron means he walks or she walks towards the field. Pros ton agron. So you can see that in the underlined portion there. If I want to use a pronoun, we'll see more of these a little bit later. You will see auton. Auton, that means him. It's an accusative. So if I say someone hits him, for example, I'll use the form auton for that. And finally, one particle that you're going to read here is de. De simply means and or but. So it can either connect ideas or it can mean blah, 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 but this is the other case. I'll see de as a postpositive, the second word in a sentence. Very easy to translate. Okay? So this is the vocabulary that you're also going to have to memorize for next week. So your homework for Monday, and we'll cover this a little bit, and I talked about this on in class and I'll have it on Blackboard, is first to read passage 1 alpha. And when you do, what I'd like you to do, if you want to, you can write a translation out, but I prefer that as we're going through it in class, you just prepare to read it from the Greek. Don't have any notes in your textbook. Don't write your translation there. Just leave the clean passage of Greek in front of you so that you can get used to reading the Greek from the Greek, not from your translation that you built. If you need to write one out for practice, that's totally fine. You can have it with you to look back and forth. But I prefer that you get used to getting comfortable with the Greek. It's okay if you take a little bit of time. And remember, if you get stuck on something, write down what you're stuck on. Tell me what you're stuck with so that we don't lose time in class. Okay? In addition to preparing that passage, I also want you to do exercise 1 alpha. That's also in this chapter, the first part. There should only be 5 short sentences that ask you to translate some Greek into English. And we'll cover those on Monday. So, I hope you are able to cover this lecture okay. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or send me a message on Blackboard, and I'll be happy to answer them or meet you during office hours. See you guys on Monday. Take care.